All right, hello everyone. Thank you for returning to watch our part two today. And we're going to be going a little bit more into what post-traumatic stress disorder is, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Additionally, we're going to be able to review some of the other disorders that are also listed within the manual and a little bit or a brief overview of what they are. So here I did include a graphic from Brown Girl Trauma, and it says, "Oh, please, it wasn't that bad." Actually, yes, it was pretty traumatizing for me. No one else gets to decide what is traumatic and what is not traumatic for you. So, with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or the DSM-5, there's also the text revision or TR, which recently was released not too long ago. It has several different disorders listed, and that includes post-traumatic stress disorder, adjustment disorder, disinhibited social engagement disorder, acute stress disorder, reactive attachment disorder, and prolonged grief. Prolonged grief was added to this text revision edition that was released more recently. And I did bold post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll go a little bit more into that. And that is the one that a lot of us are more familiar with and gives a little bit more context to what PTSD is. Additionally, there's acute stress disorder, which is similar in criteria. However, duration does differ. So briefly, to go over some of the other disorders included in the trauma and other stressors or stress-related disorders include adjustment disorder. And this is when there is an event that takes place in someone's life that they're having difficulty adjusting to or adapting to. And so this can produce a response that the DSM lists as out of proportion to the event that took place. And so that could be a separation or something else. And so you do have different symptoms that can be associated with adjustment disorder as well, including anxiety, depression, conduct disturbances, and so on and so forth. We also have disinhibited social engagement and reactive attachment disorder, which are disorders diagnosed in childhood, and they do relate to attachment or lack thereof. And so, with disinhibited social engagement disorder, this is where a child may be overly familiar or overly connecting to unfamiliar adults. And then, opposite of that is reactive attachment, where a child may be disengaged or having difficulty connecting or withdrawn from a person or caregiver or adult figure in their lives. Both are thought to be due to childhood traumatic experiences and consistent caregiving as well. Then we have prolonged grief. And in the DSM, there is a timeline that they provide for children and adults, children 6 months, adults 12 months, where there is grief or grieving characteristics that are still present 12 months after someone has passed. And then also we have acute stress, which again is similar in criteria to post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, the duration is shorter than post-traumatic stress disorder, however. Something to keep in mind is that this is to just provide a brief overview and go into a little bit more context so individuals have language. It is not intended to replace formal mental health diagnoses or treatment. And I do urge you all, if you have any thoughts that you may be struggling with something that has been listed here, I urge you to seek out a mental health professional to be able to explore that more with them and receive appropriate support and treatment around it. So, post-traumatic stress disorder, how is it listed in the DSM-5? And so, first criteria is exposure to an actual or threatened death, serious injury, or a sexual violence. So this could be somebody who's directly experiencing it. However, it does not have to be that. It could also be someone who indirectly experiences this event. So that could be include witnessing it, learning about the events that occurred to a close friend or family member. So in cases of actual or threatened death of a family member or a friend, the events must have been violent or accidental. This could be repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of an event. So, for example, a first responder who is constantly being exposed to traumatic situations out on the field, that could also be something that is considered a traumatic event. And then we go into the other criteria here for post-traumatic stress disorder. And so there are different categories that they have listed that you may have to have different numbers of symptoms for. So that experiencing of a traumatic event indirectly or directly is something that must have taken place. And then all of these have different numbers associated with them, one or two from each of these categories in order for you to meet criteria for PTSD, and it varies also with children and also with adults. And so you also have intrusive symptoms that could result after a traumatic experience, and this may look like flashbacks or intrusive memories that pop into your mind without you really consciously trying to call them up. This could also include avoidance of stimuli associated with the traumatic event. So, this can be internal reminders or external reminders, and individuals going through lengths to try and avoid those reminders for those events or those triggers. The other is negative alterations in mood. And so this can include an individual that may have difficulty remembering something, negative thoughts of themselves, others, or the world, detachment. It can also be difficulty feeling happy or producing positive feelings. Then we also have the alterations in arousal and reactivity, and this can include hypervigilance, exaggerated startle response, or recklessness. So hypervigilance might be the individual who is kind of always on guard, right, and very on edge around the different things within their environment, where we have the exaggerated startle response, where someone may have a big response to something that for other people may not be very big, or let's say there are these different things in the environment that be or may be reminiscent of a traumatic experience. You might see a really huge response from an individual that has an exaggerated startle response. And so those are just some examples of the symptoms that can be included in this category here. And so something to keep in mind, as I stated, that acute stress disorder is very similar in criteria. However, it does have a different listing and requirement for the number of symptoms that you may have. Additionally, it is for a shorter duration, typically no longer than 1 month. You'll see someone diagnosed with acute stress disorder. Additionally, a lot of folks who go on to experience traumatic situations, which so many of us can either call someone in our lives who have, or ourselves, we have undergone that as well. And so, with trauma symptoms, a lot of folks may not go on to develop PTSD. And I'll go into a little bit more on a brief slide on statistics a little bit later. But a lot of individuals who experience a traumatic event may not go on to develop or meet criteria for PTSD. But that does not negate the experience of trauma. Additionally, that doesn't negate the fact that they may have lasting effects from that, or events that produce these effects following a traumatic situation or event. And there are different reasons that individuals don't go on to develop or meet criteria for PTSD. However, these are some of the things you may see in an individual who has experienced a traumatic situation, and that can include exhaustion, confusion, difficulty regulating their emotions. Again, a lot of individuals who experience a traumatic event may have operated on these extremes, right? We may have numbness, or we may have that kind of increased fight or flight reactivity. And so it's difficulty kind of finding what that middle ground or that gray is for a lot of individuals who've had to operate in these extreme states of living. We also have attempts to numb or just feelings of numbness. And so that could be detaching oneself from the experience and maybe not feeling much around it. There's actually a very interesting story if you've ever come across Body Keeps the Score, which is, I think, still one of the most popular books I hear about that individuals read as it pertains to trauma. There's different stories in there about how individuals can detach from that experience or numb from the different traumatic experiences, while someone else who's gone through the same experience may have a completely different response, especially when faced with these different reminders. We also have sleep disorders. So that could be difficulty sleeping due to a number of reasons. Again, going back to the intrusion symptom criteria for PTSD, could also be nightmares that someone experiences. And so that could be something that's interrupting sleep. And there can be also a number of other things that may be impacting an individual's sleep. There can also be a fear of recurrence. Again, a lot of individuals may experience a traumatic event and feel very out of control, right? following it. And there's this fear that if this happens again, right, like what will I do? And you can see that come up. And I know I've seen that in my work as well. Individuals fear experiencing that again, or that those feelings again. It becomes dangerous for a lot of folks. And then we also have some individuals don't have a period of relief or calm from some of these responses. There's difficulty or fear in the identifying feelings, again, not wanting to feel that out of control feeling. Also, some individuals may manifest or identify their symptoms physically. And so that could be an individual that reports like headaches, or there can be a feeling of sickness and stomach aches and these different pains. And again, some have hypothesized that individuals might do this in order to kind of avoid some of the other things that may be a little deeper, buried deeper underneath the surface, while there can be, or others can see that there's a link, and we'll go a little bit more into that, between traumatic situations and health. And a lot of us are familiar that stress can have a negative impact on our immune systems and our bodies and our health. And again, we have found that in the research as well, when it comes to traumatic situations. And again, regardless of a physical complaint possibly being due to those things, it is always important to seek out medical professionals who can rule out or diagnose health conditions that may be present. We always want to take those complaints seriously. And then lastly, self-medication. I mentioned a little bit about finding ways to numb. Again, sometimes it is that finding relief from some of the things that you may be experiencing. You know, we try as humans just naturally to adapt, right? Our bodies are designed to try and heal and find balance. And so when it's unable to, right, we find ways that we can mitigate some of those experiences and responses. And that could include forms of self-medication like substance use, self-injury, and others. So for our next portion and our final portion of the presentation, we're going to go a little bit more into the impact of trauma on our minds and bodies. And I hope that you find a little bit more context as well as we go into this third and final section of today's presentation.